Hello there. Stay a while and listen. It's good to have you here. How are you? I would like to talk about some papers that I've been reading. And they say that cars, trucks, and other vehicles that travel roads can carry sensors to read the environment around them. And there might also be some devices alongside roads with more sensors around them. So it's a good idea to have all these machines talking to one another, to share data and information between them, what they're reading in their immediate environments. And if they share everything, they might have a broader understanding of what's the environment like and not just what's immediately around them. So when we connect all these devices in a network, that's what we call a vehicular ad hoc network, or VANET for short. An ad hoc means that each device involved forwards data to other devices on the network, and they don't need a pre-existing infrastructure to communicate. Like there's not a server, there's no central entity controlling the traffic of data that's flowing between these units, these nodes in this network. Everyone is just constantly listening to who is around, and who is around is constantly trying to talk to other units, and everyone is listening and forwarding messages all the time. So we are talking about VANETs, which are for vehicles. And aside from VANETs, people also talk about MANETs, which are for mobile ad hoc networks, or WANETs, which stands for wireless ad hoc networks. So in VANETs, we are talking about vehicles that can carry people's lives inside of them. You might be inside a vehicle that's traveling the road, and this vehicle is talking to other vehicles that are in the same road too, and your vehicle might be sharing information about the wind, the conditions on the road, and etc. So the data that they read from their surroundings and the information they learn from processing, organizing, structuring, and presenting data in a context can be very useful. For example, an abrupt deceleration of the vehicle can generate data that tells there was a crash ahead. And fire can increase the temperature rapidly, and sensors can read that data into something that tells that there is fire ahead. And finally, a gyroscope can output data that can be read by the sensor. The gyroscope can output data that a software can read, and there was a sudden loss of control of the vehicle, which with other data can mean that there was something like oil on the road ahead. So this is a pretty valuable information if you're traveling on the road with your vehicle and there's oil ahead, better watch out. In other words, that information can be vital for the people traveling in those vehicles. Therefore, it's important to keep the availability in VANETs. So, if for whatever reason someone wants to attack the availability of these networks, the traffic, the flow of data should always be available in those networks. If anyone from whatever reason they want to attack that availability, either because the attacker wants to threaten the lives of the people involved, or because it's the plot of a movie in which someone wants to jam the signal to beat the greater evil force, how can we avoid these attacks? Well, the main type of attack to the security of these networks, to the availability of those networks, is the denial of service attack, also known as DDoS. All that an attacker needs to do is to flood the network with more than the network can handle. So it's like literally screaming louder than everyone else. So nobody that is trying to talk can hear one another because someone is screaming so loudly. But it's really easy to identify who's screaming too loud and make them leave the network, so they can't be heard anymore and they won't bother anyone anymore. That's why attackers, they use more than one unit to overload the network. Because alone, one unit's not really too disturbing, but together they create so much noise that each node in the VANET will not be able to listen for what's coming or won't be able to forward what it already has received. So these are called distributed attacks, distributed denial of service attacks. When you have many distributed units talking not so loudly, so it's not really evident who is creating the noise, because there are many people creating a lot of noise. In these kinds of attacks, it's really hard to know who's behind them. And it can also be hard to distinguish between them and normal traffic at peak times. For example, some of them are very thoughtfully crafted into low-rate attacks that try to exploit vulnerabilities in a system. So an attacker might launch a distributed attack that is really hard to distinguish from normal traffic, but with a very low rate. So the frequency in which they are making noises is low. It's harder to distinguish from normal traffic, from people trying to talk normally. So they can also attack a very specific aspect of a system. For example, sending many compressed packets to a system that will try to open them naively, and it's not prepared to deal with these cases in which there's a lot to unpack. So the system would be unavailable because it would have to work so much to unpack everything. There might not be space to fit everything, so no memory. Or maybe it's going to be busy for such a long time unpacking so much things that the system was not prepared for it. It was just opening naively the thing. So there's a vulnerability in the system that can be taken advantage of by an attacker, an exploit. So the system can, for example, be working on peak memory conditions and have no more memory available for other stuff coming. And these attacks are hard to create defense mechanisms against, and they might even require a system to be updated to patch the exploit or redesigned to behave differently. Some easier attacks, on the other hand, some easier attacks to launch are high-rate DDoS attacks, which can also require more money because you need many nodes talking to a network. So people can, for example, rent many machines on the web and use those machines that they're paying for the time, or they might infect people's computers to use them without their knowledge, that they're being used to attack someone in a distributed denial of service attack. But in this case, we're not really talking about the whole internet. We're talking about VANETs, so vehicle ad hoc networks. So you kind of need a vehicle in there to be kind of rogue or take control of other vehicles. In the case of VANETs, these consist of automated attack units that can be called bots and that can also be called zombies. Yes, so your car might become a zombie and attack other cars around them. So according to the article by Poongodi, Hamdi, Sharma, Ma and Singh, these units of attack can try to disrupt the communication working in two ways. The first way is from vehicle to vehicle, and the second way is from vehicle to the infrastructure on the side of the roads. And this means that a defense mechanism should create secure routing for the VANET, considering those two vectors of attack. So that's what they did in their work. When they proposed a defense mechanism based on trust evaluation to detect and isolate DDoS attacks from VANETs. They proposed a framework that also has a clustering scheme built into it, which makes the solution scalable for networks that have many nodes interconnected between them. Like what happens at peak travel times and roads are very busy with many vehicles. So they actually projected a new methodology based on a process that works similar to human relationships, in which the frequency of positive interactions with someone can be used to build up trust between people. So just like people, each time you see someone and the interaction goes nicely, you start trusting the person more and more. And if things don't go well, or you see a negative outcome, you lose trust in that person. So this mechanism to put nodes together can also be scalable, because it treats many nodes as being one, to make it easier to detect DDoS attacks on larger scales that can be harder to listen to. And they built a trust mechanism, a trust matrix, to see who I trust and who might not be worth of trust and might be launching an attack because it's someone that has been given many negative outcomes of interactions. So in their simulated testing environment, and it's important to mention that this was only tested in a simulated testing environment, not in the real world, they found out that their solution is better than the previously existing solutions. It's really hard to test those things in the real life because you have to put many vehicles, it can be expensive. And anyway, but you need to start somewhere and testing these things in a simulation environment. And I tried to get the test to run, but the article, I would say, would need to improve a little bit more in this aspect. I didn't see clear instructions on how I could reproduce what's in there. So to show images, nice images here of these things working. But anyway, they found out that their solution is better than the previously existing solutions. That is to say that in their tests, they had a lower average latency, or the system responded faster to attacks. It took less time to find out there was an attack going on. They also obtained a higher package delivery rate, or in other words, which is to say normal communication would not be so impacted by an attack. And people were still talking to one another. The nodes of this VANET were still talking to one another when there was an attack going on. And they also seen a higher detection rate of attacks using their methodology, and they also measured all of that while using less energy or being more greener and cheaper on resources, better for the environment. So pretty good results if you ask me, and that's all I have for this time. I hope you like hearing about VANETs and DDoS attacks, and you can find the sources in the video description. And thank you. Thank you. I am very thankful for your attention, and I hope I see you again in the future.